We're taking a cable car up the mountain. Come on, let's go. Hey, I'd like to welcome you guys to Wat Umong. Welcome to the Forest Temple here outside Chiang Mai. Uh, what I thought I would do is just give you guys a little bit of an introduction to this temple before we go in. And there was actually a couple of questions people were asking me about clothing, so I'll talk with you guys a little bit about that too. So here, this is a Thai forest temple, and oftentimes what people do is they will come here in order to learn the teachings. That there's temples inside the city, but oftentimes those ordained practitioners are busy with funerals and weddings and things like this. So oftentimes, if you're interested in studying the teachings yourself, people will actually come to a forest temple. And a lot of these forest temples, they have places for you to sleep and stay. You can stay multiple nights. You know, this temple, you can stay anywhere from 3 to 15 days. I'll show you guys where that is if you'd ever like to come here, where you can live right alongside the monks essentially and learning and growing and developing here at a place where you're kind of removed from the city and all the temptations of all the maybe central desires that you might have. So I'll explain to you guys what that is when we go in. Here at the beginning of this temple, they have this little kind of gift shop and refreshment place, because people oftentimes, if they're not coming here for 3 to 15 days, they'll actually come for an entire day. They might be here for 6 hours or 8 hours. So what they'll do is they'll have refreshments, and they even have vendors inside the temple in order to allow people to buy the refreshments that they need, so they don't have to go outside and find things outside. So if you guys would like water or drinks or snacks, you can get them here, and they have stuff inside too. Also, what you see here is you see these little gift baskets. These are for the ordained practitioners, that if somebody would like to practice generosity, oftentimes we're practicing generosity all throughout our day, but also when you come to a temple, some people choose to practice generosity. And what generosity does for you is it teaches your mind to give and share. It trains your mind to let go. Because the thing that's causing your mind to be angry and sad and frustrated and having stress and anxiety and all these other discontent feelings is that the mind's holding on. It doesn't want to let go. You see something you disagree with, and your mind holds on to that and holds on to that, and you just get so angry and so frustrated you can't let it go. Or maybe you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, and when you guys are together, everything's fine, but then when you guys break up, you're feeling lonely or bored or frustrated. This isn't because of the love that's causing that. It's the mind holding on. It's not willing to let go. The unenlightened mind is craving permanence. It's wanting things to be permanent, but yet you live in this impermanent world. Everything around you is impermanent, but yet the mind constantly craves permanence. You might crave for your mom or dad to be a certain way, or you might crave for the world to be a certain way, or you might be holding on to your money, and when your bank account is a certain balance, you're so happy, but then when it goes down, you feel sad or frustrated or agitated, because the mind's craving this permanence and wanting things to be permanent. So this is where the mind is causing its own discontent feelings. So by practicing breathing mindfulness meditation like we did this morning, train your mind to let go. More and more as you accumulate those benefits, you can train your mind to let go. And also practicing generosity, where you're giving and sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources. So some people, when they come to the temple, they like to practice generosity, and some people will bring gifts with them to give to the ordained practitioners, or they might give a financial contribution, or that's why they have these here, that some people like to purchase things here. You aren't ever required to give anything when you visit a temple. It's up to you. The Thai people have created this national treasure that is, like I mentioned to you guys, like a mental health network. And Thai people, when they come to the temple, they will usually contribute something because they're here, they're using the bathroom, they're, you know, the people need to take care of the tiles and the maintenance of the temple. So Thai people usually give 20 baht, 40 baht, 100 baht here or there, or they might get a gift for the ordained practitioners as a way to contribute and keep this mental health network surviving in the country. So if at any time you would ever like to do those kinds of things, you're welcome to, but you're never expected to. And they make it available to you by having it here, or some people like to purchase these things outside as well. Like I mentioned, some of you guys asked me about clothing. There's some temples that do have certain rules about clothing. As you notice, I don't have any of that kind of stuff. You can wear whatever you like at any time. The reason why they have these things is that in order to get to enlightenment, an individual needs to eliminate their central desire, where their mind is longing, yearning through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself for pleasure. One of the things that the mind is doing is it's craving and desiring for pleasure. But this pleasure is conditional. If you base your inner feelings on some condition, that happiness, it'll arise, it'll change, and it'll fade away. That if you get happy when it's sunny outside, for example, you'll be happy when it's sunny, but when it rains, you'll be sad or frustrated because your mind's craving that permanence, but yet the sun is not permanent. So one of the things that the mind's craving is pleasure of the body, so that, someone might be sexually aroused when they see somebody wearing, less clothes than another. So in these temples, what they try to do is they try to create an environment for the ordained practitioners that they can train their mind to eliminate any kind of sensual desire. Now, by the time you get to enlightenment, it doesn't matter what you see, you're not going to have any kind of desire for sexual contact. So if an enlightened being saw a naked man or a woman, they would have no interest in having sex whatsoever. Their mind is going to be fully trained. But someone in the process of getting there, their mind can arise sensual desire and they could potentially be enticed. So what they do is they ask for people to wear certain clothing so it keeps the environment such that the ordained practitioners that are living there, they can continue to train their mind because they're in the process of getting to enlightenment and they may not be actually enlightened yet. So when you're visiting someone's home, like you're visiting a temple, you're visiting someone's home. It's like all the monks live here and they're trying to train their mind by being here. So if you choose to wear certain clothing or not, it's kind of like out of respect for the people who are here, that you're helping them to be able to train their mind to eliminate their sensual desire. So you might see signs along the way where they're asking you to wear certain things. I don't see anybody that's wearing anything that they would typically say, they shouldn't wear or something like that. But just know that whenever you come around me and whenever you come to study with me, you can wear anything and everything you like. I don't have any rules about anything, whether it's clothing or where you should sit or how you should sit or anything like that. You can do whatever you feel comfortable with. But when you visit some of these other places, they do sometimes have those things and you might see that. And different places will have different things that they ask you to do. This is just from a misunderstanding that sometimes people think the way to solve their own mental problems is to fix the outside world, where the problems that an individual is experiencing isn't the outside world, it's the inner world. And when you train your own mind, this is where you can experience the peace and the joy. So you'll see these things because people are trying to create an environment in which they can train their mind. But ultimately, these same individuals, they're going to be on Facebook, they're going to be walking down the street, they're going to be confronted with these kinds of things at some point or another. So ultimately, they're going to need to train their mind to be able to restrain their mind. So while you're visiting someone's home, you probably would like to do whatever it is that they ask you to do in order to kind of get along well. But just understand, if anybody gets angry or sad or somebody kicks you out of their temple or refuses entry, and they get frustrated and agitated that you've shown up with certain clothing, you're not causing their frustration. You're not causing their discontentedness. It's their mind craving permanence and wanting everybody to wear something in a certain way permanently. And it's just not possible for everybody to wear the same exact things. There's some temples that even require you to wear all white. That anybody who comes into the temple, you have to wear all white. So you'll see these kinds of things from place to place. But you at least understand where it's coming from and why people are doing it. And then you can decide for yourself whether you would like to do those things or not. And just know that whenever you're around me, you can just wear whatever you like at any time that you like. So any questions here at the beginning of this temple you guys would like to ask? Okay, so we'll just go ahead and walk in, and I'm going to show you guys a few things along the way. I'll be stopping and talking about different things, and then you guys can ask any and all questions that you like. Okay, so welcome, and let's go have a good time. Okay, so this is a map of the entire complex, and there's actually things that are at this complex that aren't on the actual map that we might have a chance to visit. We'll kind of see how our day goes. Right here, obviously you are here, right? We're just at this little building right here. What we're going to end up doing is walking around here. I'm going to be stopping at a few places. This is the area where you can come and stay and sleep and live alongside the monks. We're going to be stopping there, and I'll show you guys that. We'll be coming through here and stopping at a few places. Then we're going to go into the main hall, and we'll sit down and relax and chat there if we're able to get in. Then we'll come out and we're going to walk up to kind of like the highlight of this temple, which is this big stupa. This was built about 700 years ago. So I'll stop off here and kind of show you guys this. Then the other main attraction is these tunnels. You guys can go in here and see the tunnels if you like. Then we'll come to this pillar at a certain point. And at that point, I'll check in with you guys and see where we're at in terms of time. And we can either leave at that point and go have lunch, or we can extend the tour depending on what you guys vote, where there's a Thai cemetery over here. If you've never seen a Thai cemetery, I can show you what that is. And there's a museum over here that sometimes people like to visit on the way out. There's a museum that we can visit. If my son was with us, he would probably take you guys over here to the lake to see the fish and feed the fish. So if anybody would like to do that, we can kind of talk about extending the tour when we get to this particular point and see if you guys would like to extend it, or if you're kind of hungry and feeling like you'd like to go have lunch. So I'll check in with you guys. And then essentially what we're going to do is we're going to circle all the way back. We're going to come all the way back around to where those trucks are. I imagine you guys will be all together at different times, but if for some reason somebody gets split up, you'll always be able to find us at these trucks. We're not going to leave without the trucks, so you can always get back here. Okay, so we'll head down the pathway here, and I'll show you guys the next thing. All right, so come on in. So you guys are going to see many different statues during our trip today. And it's important to understand that the Buddha never taught anybody to make a statue of him, but people did make statues of him. So each one of these statues, they actually don't look like the Buddha the way he looked when he was alive, but they do represent a particular time frame in his life. So if you understand his life story, you can look at these individual statues and it'll tell you something about his life story, or remind you something about his life story, and also your journey to enlightenment. If you guys remember back at the temple where I teach, on the back wall, there's that big picture of the Buddha, and I have it on my phone. I usually show it to you guys, but since my phone's being used, I can't show it to you guys. But there's a picture of what the Buddha looked like during his lifetime. That here, what you've got is you've got a statue of what somebody thought that he looked like. But the people who started making statues of him, they didn't start making statues of him until about 200 to 300 years after his death. The people that were actually making statues had never lived during his lifetime. And what happened is they came in contact with the Greek people, and the Greek people were making statues of their gods because they believed in many different gods. And these people who were practicing the Buddhist teachings were like, who do we have to make a statue out of? So they started making a statue out of the Buddha. And since they never lived during the lifetime of the Buddha, they didn't know what he actually looked like. So they started casting statues like this. He didn't actually have a crown on his head like this. He didn't walk around like that. He just had a shaved head. Just like if you shaved your head, he had the same exact appearance. He was a prince at one time, destined to become a king, but he stepped down from that. And when he stepped down, he just wore, basic rag robes. And oh, there it is. Yeah, here you go. Frank's got it. This picture here is what the Buddha looked like during his lifetime. The artist who took this or did this artwork, they looked at the original teachings of the Buddha, where he described what he actually looked like. This is in the Pali Canon, and the artist depicted him in this particular artwork. But the people who started making statues of him, they didn't look at those same teachings, and they just started casting statues of what they thought he looked like. And I guess they must have known that he was a prince, destined to become a king, and maybe they thought he walked around with a crown on his head or something like that. So that's why they did it that way, but that's not the way he actually looked. You can see clearly in his teachings that he talks about how he shaved his head, and that's what he did, and his students did as well. So you'll see statues that oftentimes in Thailand people say they look very Thai. Whereas if you go to China, you'll see statues, he looks very Chinese. If you go to Japan, he looks very Japanese, right? Because the artists and those cultures, they understand people through their own cultural lens, and they're going to cast a statue based on what they think a person looks like. So if you're a Chinese artist living in China, the Buddha looks Chinese, right? Or if he lives in another country, it looks like a different way. So you can see in this artwork, which was actually done by a Thai person, he looks like somebody from Northeast India or Nepal, which is where the Buddha was born. He was born in what we refer to as Nepal, and then he taught in Northeast India. So he looks in that picture very much like an individual from that part of the world. But like I mentioned, each one of these statues, they do depict a time frame in his life and kind of something that he was doing. So if you understand his life and you look at these statues, it can kind of speak to you and remind you of his life. And this particular statue is very, very common. You'll see this one a lot because it represents the one and only miracle that he ever performed. That when he first got to enlightenment, he came back to the part of the world where he was hanging out with some classmates and a former teacher, and he sits down and he touches the earth and he performs this miracle where all these animals come to where he's at. And the birds come, the lizards come, the snakes come, the deer come, the rabbits, the squirrels. And this is a miracle for his first 5 students to show them like, hey, I've gotten to enlightenment. Because they were mocking him and joking him and they were thinking that he hadn't gotten to enlightenment. So rather than say, I am enlightened, which they would have no way of knowing, he just sat down and performed a miracle. And then those first 5 people knew that he had gotten to enlightenment and they listened to what he had to say. And he discovered the truth of what it takes to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. And in that particular discourse, he shared what's called the Four Noble Truths. These are 4 simple statements that explains the problem in your mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And you can independently verify the teachings of the Buddha, where you can see that it is indeed your own mind that's causing this anger and sadness, that it's the mental longing and eagerness, the craving, the desire, the attachment, the mind wanting things to be a certain way. And when it gets that, it gets happy. But when you don't get what you want, you get sad or frustrated or agitated. So a Buddha's teachings isn't based on everybody knowing that he's a Buddha. In fact, it's better if people don't know that he's a Buddha. But those first 5 students, very instrumental in his development and continued teaching career, he needed to perform this miracle to help those first 5 students. And then after that, he doesn't perform any miracles because his teachings are independently verifiable. The more you learn them and examine them and investigate them, you can reflect on them and see that they're true, and then you practice them and train your mind. So this is depicting that time frame in his life where he's performing a miracle. Whenever you see him sitting down and his hand is kind of reaching down towards the earth, this is depicting that miracle. So a Buddha doesn't perform countless miracles. They just usually perform one for people who are instrumental in getting things going and moving in the right direction. And then after that, they're wise enough to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They're wise enough to share their teachings without other people knowing that they're an actual Buddha. And it actually helps that people don't know that he's a Buddha. Because if everybody knew that he was a Buddha, they would have been on their best behavior when they were around him. And then he wouldn't be able to use one of the strong powers that a Buddha has, which is being able to observe the quality of a student's mind and then provide them teachings that will actually help them. Whereas if everybody was on their best behavior around him, he wouldn't be able to see the natural state of their mind. So he didn't need to convince others that he was a Buddha. His mind was peaceful, it was calm, it was serene, it was content with joy. His ability to help others get to enlightenment isn't contingent on people knowing that he's an actual Buddha. So that's what a Buddha is going to be doing. Behind here, you see this wheel. This is referred to as a dhamma wheel, the word dhamma is Pali. In English, we call it teachings, but it doesn't really translate very well into English when we call it a teachings wheel, right? But what it's doing is it's representing something for you, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, everything he taught was oral. They didn't write anything down. The technology to write things down existed in China, but it didn't exist in that region of the world, so he just spoke orally. And then he used symbols like this. So if you were in a discourse with the Buddha and you understood his core central teachings, then you could see a symbol like this, maybe on a barn or somewhere else, and you would remind you of this particular teaching. So what this is representing is the wheel is representing the cycle of rebirth, that you're stuck in this continuous cycle of being reborn over and over and over and over again. And this can be independently verified as well. You might not have the wisdom of how to do that right now, but eventually you can get to a point where you independently verify the cycle of rebirth. Then the individual spokes, there's 8 spokes there. That's representing the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the way to escape the cycle of rebirth. This is the way to escape your discontentedness. By training your mind in the Eightfold Path, you're able to then escape out of this continuous discontentedness where the mind struggles with anger, sadness, and frustration over and over and over again. So the 12 o'clock position, this is right view. For those of you guys that have studied with me and you know what right view is, that's right view. And then it goes from there, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood is the 6 o'clock position. Then you've got right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration is about 10 or 11 o'clock position, right? So these individual steps, if you've learned them, they mean something to you. And you're practicing those things on a day-to-day basis. Because if you learn the individual steps of the Eightfold Path, this is your path to enlightenment. This is how you get to enlightenment, is through the Eightfold Path. And as you learn and grow and develop the Eightfold Path, this is where you'll see your discontentedness gradually diminishing. That you'll see that you're less and less angry, less and less frustrated, less and less annoyed, and in more situations you can maintain your peacefulness and your joy. So this is usually placed behind the head of a Buddha because uh, when a Buddha awakens to enlightenment, a Buddha has this Dhamma wheel on their head and they turn this Dhamma wheel counterclockwise. And this is a figurative thing. It's not a physical thing that's on their head, it's a figurative thing. Because a Buddha awakening to enlightenment and existing in the world, it's the very best thing that could ever happen for all of the world. And if you live during the lifetime of a Buddha, it's the very best thing that could ever happen for you because that's the time that you can deeply learn the teachings and gain the wisdom of what it takes to get to enlightenment. So the turning of this Dhamma wheel is like a signification of humanity stepping forward and entering into a new era because now there's a Buddha awake in the world that is enlightened with deep, profound wisdom because they got to enlightenment by themselves. And now they can help countless people get to enlightenment. Because one of the first criteria of what makes a Buddha is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. Then they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people during their life. And now, during that time frame, they will help countless people get to enlightenment. And then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the three main criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. They get to enlightenment by themselves, they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, and then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people get to enlightenment after their death. So this turning of the Dhamma wheel is like humanity entering into a new era, entering into a new time frame where now the wisdom is in the world that can be learned and practiced and developed so that you can train your mind and actually experience enlightenment. And they ask you to wear all white during your time here. And then essentially you have the whole day to yourself. You wake up in the morning, you take a shower, whatever you're going to do, you have breakfast, you clean up at the temple a little bit, you listen to the monks, do some meditation, and you have the whole day to do whatever you like. And they ask that you don't have your mobile phones with you and stuff like this, because putting yourself in an environment like this where you remove all the things that you're usually used to at home, you'll see what your mind's craving for. Right? If you're used to that comfortable bed and that special pillow and, kicking back on your sofa and watching TV, you'll be able to see, my mind really wants that right now. Or that special cup of coffee that you drink every morning, you'll see what your mind is longing and yearning for. So sometimes people will enter into environments like this for a period of time to kind of observe their mind and see what is their mind actually craving. So it's not actually being here that's actually going to necessarily create any kind of magical development in your life. It's once you're here, you can observe your mind and you can see what you're longing and yearning for. And then you need to apply the teachings to be able to train your mind to let those things go. Where you might decide that, yes, you are going to sit on the couch at different times, but you need to train your mind that it's not permanent and your body's not going to be permanently comfortable. So here, you're going to experience things that are far away from your daily comforts at home. And this will give you a chance to be able to observe your mind and train your mind further. So anytime you would like to come to this place or any other place, there's like a lot of these all over Thailand. You can go in and out of these as you like. As household practitioners, they usually have a maximum of 15 days, but some temples, they have even longer. You can stay for longer. Each temple is set up a little bit differently. And you can decide to come into these places if you like. I usually suggest for people, and the Buddha suggested as well, that you get some training under your belt first. If this was like your first stop in your journey to enlightenment, you might get dissuaded and like completely go away from everything. You need to be able to have the training of meditation and the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and some of these other things in order to help you when you're in this environment. Because as you're experiencing annoyance and frustration and agitation and all these other feelings, you're going to need certain tools and techniques to help you. There was one time a student of the Buddha who came to the Buddha. He was studying with the Buddha for about 6 months or so. And he told the Buddha that he was going to go out in the forest all by himself and stay in the forest by himself. Because this was normal for the Buddha's senior students to go out in the forest and spend time alone. And the Buddha said, you should stay here, stay among the community. Your mind's essentially not ready to go out there in the forest. And the student's like, no, I want to go in the forest. I want to go in the forest. I want to go out there. And the Buddha tells him a story. He says, okay, just imagine there's this fast flowing river with a strong current, and there's this big, strong bull elephant, and it walks down into the river, and it's playing in the water and frolicking in the water and washing itself, and then it kind of slowly comes out of the river sure-footedly and climbs up the bank and gets out of the water. And there's like this rabbit or this hare, this cat maybe watching the bull elephant, And the rabbit's like, I want to be a bull elephant too. I want to be a bull elephant too. And then when the elephant comes out, the rabbit goes over to the river and it gets washed away by this strong current because it's not a bull elephant. So the moral of the story is, hey, new student, you're brand new. Your mind isn't quite stable and strong and steady yet. You're not a bull elephant. You're not going to be able to go into that strong current. So in this environment where you're completely isolated and alone and you've got 12 hours, 14 hours of just doing nothing, essentially, your mind may or may not be able to handle that, where you don't have your phone, you don't have your creature comforts. It's better to build up your wisdom, build up your training of your mind for a period of time, maybe a year or 2 or 3 even, who knows? Everybody's a little bit different, before you put your mind into an environment like this. But some people, they like to go off and do these things. You're more than welcome to do them at any point that you choose to do them, but just be sure your mind's ready and stable and steady, and that you've got some teachings under your belt to help you through that period of time. Because coming to a place like this, there isn't anything mystical or magical that's going to magically help you on the path to enlightenment. It's more about making sure you have the tools and techniques and the training to help you through. And while you're here, that you can observe your mind and see the cravings that you have, so that then when you're away from here, you can now work on those cravings to eliminate them. And it doesn't mean you're going to eliminate the object, it just means you're going to eliminate the longing, yearning for it. So you don't have to eliminate your mobile phone to get to enlightenment, for example. You can get to enlightenment with a mobile phone, but you need to be able to train your mind not to crave for it to be permanent, that you're not longing, yearning, and holding on to it. So once you're at a place like this, you'll be able to see what your mind's longing and yearning for, and then outside of here, train your mind to let those things go. And there's certain training that you learn from a teacher like me that will help you understand how to do that. Okay, so over here, what we've got in Thai and then in English, we've got the rules that they say that, this is their rules, right? And this is what they ask of you. So if you were coming here, you'd probably like to read these and make sure that you're prepared with these particular things that they ask for. Okay, so any questions here?
Do they teach silent meditation? Because I just noticed Vipassana. I once done Vipassana, but I don't silent meditation. Is that what they teach?
I think so. I've never been here myself. There's been students of mine who come here, but I've never actually come to stay. And I think what this is the bell to have people come eat. I think that's what they're doing, because they usually eat at like 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. So it's probably about 11, I would say. Is that what time it is?
Yep.
Yeah.
Are there times in the day are they eating?
7 a.m. and 11 a.m.
Only twice.
Yeah, only twice. The Buddha ate only once during his life, one time a day, before noon. But we think that maybe during the lifetime of the Buddha, there was higher caloric value, more calories in food than there is today. Like a broccoli today may not have as many calories as it had during the lifetime of the Buddha, because of the pollution and the quality of the soil and things like this, that our food we don't think is as high of a quality as it was during the lifetime of the Buddha. You don't have to eat once a day or even twice a day in order to get to enlightenment. You can actually eat multiple meals a day, but what you need to do is eat in moderation, where you're not gorging or you're not eating in emotion. Sometimes you get angry or frustrated or sad, and you might turn to those brownies or that big tub of ice cream, and what your mind's trying to do is get away from those painful feelings and move to something that's pleasant, but it's using craving, desire, attachment to do it. And now it's just keeping the problem going, because now when you get those pleasant feelings from the ice cream, when that wears off, your mind's right back in the painful feelings again, because it's just temporary. So the last thing you're interested in doing is eating based on emotion. So that's why the Buddha only ate once a day, is that the mind didn't get a chance to decide, like, at 4 p.m. I got some bad news, and now I'm going to go eat in order to try to get to something somewhat pleasant, which is the happy feelings based on food. So you can train your mind to accomplish the same thing that the Buddha was teaching without eating just once a day. Like when you go to a restaurant, instead of like you picking what food you want, you can just say, excuse me, waitress, server, what would you recommend to eat here? And then they point and say, okay, I'll take that. Even if it's something you would never ever eat before, you can just eat that. Or say you're with a group of people and somebody orders, you'll say, I'll have the same thing as her. Right? This is a way to like train your mind to remove your mind from the decision of what food you should eat. Because there's certain foods that you like and certain foods that you don't like. And because of that, your mind is having craving. Like maybe like a durian fruit. Maybe you don't like durian fruit, and maybe you push it away. You're like, no way I'm eating that fruit. That's because of your craving. The mind is trying to get pleasure through the tongue. Where what you can do is you can train your mind that this food is to nourish the body. It's not to please the tongue and please the mind. But that's what the mind does with sensual desire, is it thinks this food is here to please the tongue and please the mind. And now you stay stuck where you have these cravings, desires, your mind's holding on, and you're repulsed by certain food, and you're attracted to other foods, where this is just your sensual desire. And you can train the mind away from that by just not allowing the mind to select its food. Have somebody else select it for you, essentially. So if somebody's ordering, you just say, I'll have the same thing as her. Or, food server, what do you recommend here? Oh, okay, I'll have that. Even if it's something that you'd never eat before. And this will train your mind to stop seeing food as a pleasure. It doesn't mean you can't ever enjoy your food, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be enjoying everything. But you need to learn how to enjoy something without getting conditioned pleasant feelings. That's the challenge that the unenlightened mind has, is it doesn't know how to do that. So this is one of the ways that you can train your mind to do that. And essentially this is simulating what the monks do, which is walk down the street carrying a bowl, and they just accept any food that's offered to them, and they just eat whatever food they're offered from the household practitioners. And one of the ways you can simulate that in the household environment is the way that I just described. But there's also some countries that have food plans. This is another way you can do it, that you can order a food plan that you don't partake in the menu, and the food just shows up like twice a week or 3 times a week, and you just eat whatever's there. You can do it this way too. This is a way to train your mind to not see food as something that you're going to get pleasant feelings from. So conditioned pleasant feelings are different than enjoying something, and this is something that you can learn how to do. Mm-hmm. Other questions?
Yeah, I have one more question. Because I went to a meditation in Bangkok, and the monk taught me that not killing is a basic principle of Buddhism. I hope I got that right. And that's why he meant he is like vegetarian, so he won't eat fish or meat or like even kill a mosquito. Do you practice that as well? So are monks all vegetarians?
Not all monks are vegetarian, because everybody's in their own development and progressing at their own pace and making their own decisions for their life. But if you're practicing the teachings very closely, you would look at your food intake. And there's a good chance that you would choose to move toward a plant-based food supply, because by killing that animal, or even someone else killing it, and you choosing to ingest it, it's going to cause harm to your body. Because that's what the Buddha is teaching you, is the cause and effect, or the action and result. And by choosing to eat meat, you're not just eating the flesh of the animal, you're eating drugs and hormones and toxins that are affecting your body, and are also affecting the mind as well. And it's also affecting the environment when we're having so much killing of animals in the world. So I eat a plant-based food supply, and I teach people that if they would like to move to one, that would be wise, and here's how to do it. But each person choosing to do that, it's their own choice, it's their own decision. Everything in their life is their own decision, and I'm just showing them the cause and effect, and then they make whatever decisions are best for them.
One more question for that, because I know that monks in the morning, they go with the poor and they don't ask for donations, but if people want to donate something, they can. And is it common that people only donate vegetarian food? Do they have that in mind, or do they donate also meat?
Here in Thailand, one of the big misunderstandings that a lot of people have is around eating of meat. They think that if the person who killed the animal is the one who's experiencing the harm, they think if they eat it that they're not actually experiencing any harm, but they haven't looked to be able to see more closely. But because of this misunderstanding, this is why we see a lot of stomach cancer here in Thailand, because they do eat a lot of meat, and they eat a lot of grilled meat, which is really not good for the stomach. So the average Thai person is probably eating meat, but more and more you see pockets of people that are practicing the teachings more and more closely, because the Buddha didn't teach no killing. What he taught was to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, and not to take life. But there's some situations, like say you had a termite infestation at your home, and to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings doesn't mean you just let the termites eat your home. It means that these termites are causing harm, and now harm is going to come to them, most likely. But if there's a way for you to eradicate these termites without killing them, of course you would choose to do that. But right now there isn't a way to do that. So unfortunately, these insects, with a lack of consciousness and a lack of decision making, they're choosing to eat the home when they could be eating the trees out in the forest, and they wouldn't be causing any harm to others. but they're choosing to eat this home. So you're living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And the average Thai person hasn't necessarily studied with the original words of the Buddha to be able to see that he didn't teach eating meat. And the more that you understand it, you'll be able to see that it does cause harm to your body. Someone else can't kill the animal and you eat the meat and not experience any unwholesome results. It's like if somebody stole a car and you were driving it and the police catch you, you're going to jail, right? Because you're driving the car. It's the same thing that if you're eating the meat, you're still experiencing unwholesome results because of it. But you'll see this misunderstanding and other misunderstandings as well within Thai society.
For that example of the termites, is there then like a hierarchy of like living beings being valued more than the other?
No.
You know what I mean? Because
No.
what you're saying, like, well, the termites are in my home.
Yeah.
So we need to like remove them, but I'm like, wait a minute, termites are also living beings. So is there like a hierarchy of value?
No, it's not a hierarchy of value. Everybody's equal. But it's the same thing if a human being broke into your house at 3 a.m. in the morning and was trying to kill you,
Right.
you would need to defend this body. So whenever you're practicing loving kindness and compassion, it starts with this being first. You need to have loving kindness and compassion for yourself, or else you're not going to be able to make wise decisions in the world. And you can't have loving kindness and compassion for others if you don't show it to yourself first. So just allowing the termites to eat your home or allowing somebody to come into your home and stab you to death, this wouldn't be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because you're not living compassionately for this being. But if a being is coming at you and causing harm, the best thing you can do is try to get away or somehow eradicate these termites without harming. But if they're choosing to harm, the harm that's coming to them is based on their choice to harm. It's not based on your choice. It's based on their choice. So it's not a hierarchy of beings. It's making sure you prioritize your own loving kindness and compassion for this being who you are.
Like first and foremost.
Yeah. But that's not to say there's a hierarchy. It's just a matter of understanding that whenever you're practicing loving kindness and compassion, you've got to start with this being first. Because if you don't show loving kindness and compassion to this being, you're going to deplete yourself. You're going to deplete your resources. You're going to be exhausted. This is where people get burned out in jobs. Or if you're in a family and you're just giving and giving and giving and giving and giving, you're going to feel depleted at a certain point because you're not showing loving kindness and compassion to this being. And some cultures teach this, that you go out and you essentially deplete yourself and you lay yourself down on the road and let people walk over top of you. But the Buddha doesn't teach that, because that's not going to lead to your peacefulness and your joy and your contentment in life. So he teaches you to have loving kindness and compassion for this being first. And then as you do that, then you can have loving kindness for others. But that's not to say there's a hierarchy or anything like that. And also, if there's harm coming at you, you would like to extinguish that harm as easily as possible. And that's why I teach, if someone broke into your house at 3 a.m. in the morning, if you can, the best thing to do is get out. But in all cases, you're not going to be able to get out because that's permanence. So in some cases, you might need to get a baseball bat or get something else, but you would like to cause the least amount of harm as possible. And that's what's going to handle that situation. Okay, all right, so let's head out. We'll continue on our tour. I'll teach you guys some more. All right, so here I'm going to teach you guys about what we've got here. Because here what you've got is you've got an open lotus flower and you've got a closed lotus flower. And lotus flowers are used as symbolism in the Buddhist teachings because the growth of a lotus flower symbolizes your growth and development on the path to enlightenment. Essentially what you've got with a lotus flower is you've got these roots that are deep down into the mud, typically in like a pond with murky water, and the roots are holding on to the earth really tightly. And then it's got to grow this strong stalk to move through the murkiness of the water, and then it rises above the water and it blooms into a lotus flower. So this is what you're doing on your journey to enlightenment, is that your mind is holding on to the world, wanting the world to be a certain way. And it's not that way. It's not the way your mind wants it to be. It's the way that the natural laws are describing. And the world's never going to be the way your mind wants it to be. Instead, it's going to function according to the natural laws. But as long as you have a craving or a desire for the world to function according to you, you'll be frustrated when it doesn't function that way. So your mind is holding on to the world. And then you've got to grow this strong practice of the teachings, training your mind with meditation and all these other teachings to rise above the murkiness of the world. Just like the murky water, you got to rise above the murkiness of the world. And then you can bloom into a lotus flower, right? And this is essentially representing enlightenment. So when you see a bloomed lotus flower like this is symbolizing enlightenment. Oftentimes you'll see statues of the Buddha, it'll have a lotus flower carved on the bottom, and the statue of the Buddha will be on top of that. And that's symbolizing enlightenment. When you see a closed lotus flower like this is symbolizing your potential to get to enlightenment. It's reminding you, like, hey, you're not enlightened yet, but you have the potential. So oftentimes you'll see a lot of closed lotus flowers around Buddhism. So when we go into the main hall, you'll see some closed lotus flowers where it's reminding you of your potential to be able to get to enlightenment. And this one is distinguishing that an individual is enlightened. They have a bloomed lotus flower. Okay? So we'll head off this way, unless you guys would like to get a drink or some food or something. Okay, so as I mentioned, each one of these statues, they depict a lifetime, or a certain period of time in the Buddha's lifetime. And each one of these statues represents a certain story. And they may or may not be true. And whether they're true or not, in all reality, is not necessarily 100% of the picture. Instead, sometimes a story like this that I'm going to tell you, it most likely isn't true, but there's certain lessons embedded into the story that help you in your journey to enlightenment. So as long as you get the lessons that it takes to help you get to enlightenment, that's what's important. So I'm going to tell you this story about this statue, and then I'll extrapolate the lessons for you that are going to help you in your journey to enlightenment. So the story is that when the Buddha left from the initial two people that he was studying with, realizing that it wasn't their teachings that lead to enlightenment, he decides to go into the forest by himself and tries to train his mind. And when he's in the forest, he's not enlightened yet, but he's deep, deep, deep in meditation, training his mind. And apparently it was raining and the forest was flooding. And now as the forest was flooding and the water was coming up higher and higher and higher, he was so deep in meditation, he didn't even realize that the forest was flooding. And this snake, apparently, realizing that this person was about to become a Buddha, coils underneath of him, lifts him up above the water, and then shields him with his hood so that he wouldn't get wet and he could remain in meditation, right? So whether this story is true or not, I don't know. I've never seen a snake do that, right? So I wasn't there at the time. I can't independently verify it. But I can independently verify for you that you need to be so deep in meditation that everything around you, you're not affected by. So if you're like at your house meditating and the neighbor's baby is crying, you're not interested in having that affect your mind. That's just impermanence. Just bring your mind back to the breath. Or like today when we were at the temple meditating, if a car or truck went by honking their horn or playing music, don't allow it to affect your mind. Reside unaffected by this impermanence. It's just impermanence. But your mind might crave permanence. You might crave that permanent silence during your meditation, and it's just not going to happen. No matter where you're at, even in an isolated cave somewhere, there's going to be a sound. Occasionally. There's going to be a rock that falls, there's going to be some water dripping, there's going to be a bat that comes in there's going to be something that happens that makes some sound. So you can't be in permanent silence, but that's what the mind will oftentimes crave. So you would like to get to a point where you're so deep in meditation that you're not affected by this impermanence that's happening all around you. So that's the moral of this story here. So whether this story is actually true or not, I don't know, but you can see the important lesson for yourself in meditation. Okay? All right, so we'll head over here. This isn't part of the teachings of the Buddha, but it's part of Thai culture, Thai folk tradition. So I'll teach it to you so you understand it when you see it. But just know that it's not part of the teachings of the Buddha. If your culture has the idea of Mother Earth and you think about Mother Earth, this is the Thai representation of Mother Earth. In this particular statue, what she's doing is she's taking her hair and she's dipping it in the water, and now she's bringing it up and she's wringing out the water. And this statue is done in what we refer to as the Lana style or the northern style, because at different times the Thai people had capitals established, and as they were getting destroyed, they had to move further and further south, where now their capital is Bangkok, where at one time their capital was Chiang Mai. And then that got destroyed. They had to move further south, like Sukhothai. That got destroyed. They moved further south to Ayutthaya. That got destroyed. They went down to Bangkok. This was like their last stand. So at each one of these time frames, they had a certain period of time that they were at that place. So in Chiang Mai held for a little bit over 100 years. I can't remember Sukhothai, how long that held. Ayutthaya held for about 400 years. This was like the golden era of Thai society where people got really rich and really wealthy because the capital held for a long time so they could establish a lot of trade and they became very rich and very wealthy. And then they moved down to Bangkok. So at each one of these time frames, there's different artwork that represents those time frames. So whenever you see something very elaborate and very decorative like this is the Lanna style or the northern style. And if we're able to go inside here today, I'm going to show you statues from each one of those time frames of Chiang Mai, the Lanna style, the Sukhothai style, the Ayutthaya style. You'll be able to see those. And then when you're traveling around Thailand or even other parts of the world, if you see a statue, you'll know what time frame it comes from based on the way that it's been created. Okay, so I'll take you guys over here and show you some more things. Does this look familiar to anybody? Do you guys know what this is? What's that? Closed lotus. What does a closed lotus flower mean?
Potential.
Potential for what? Enlightenment, that you have the potential for enlightenment, right? So that's what this is representing. But what this is this is a marker for the main hall. Whenever you have a main hall, there's going to be, of course, the big temple complex. We call this whole thing the temple. But then this is the main hall, or in Thai, what we refer to it as is the sala. And the main hall or the main sala is where any events are happening at that temple complex. They're typically going to happen inside the main sala. So if you were coming to this temple and you'd never been here before and you knew there was an event, you're going to look for the main hall. And these markers are going to show you that this is where the main hall is. And what this would have been at one time would be just raw land. And they would have dug holes down deep into the earth. And they have these big balls. And they drop these balls down, these big concrete balls. They drop them down into the ground. And now they build these temple markers. And these temple markers are in the directions of the compass. So the Buddha will typically sit in the west, and he's looking towards the east. And then the marker over there, that's north, of course. This is northeast, this is east, and south, and so forth and so on. There's 8 of them in all directions of the compass. And then there's a big ball right in the middle of the actual main hall. They don't put a marker there, but it's deep down into the earth. So you can, if this temple was ever destroyed or any kind of thing happened like that, these big concrete balls will be down in the earth and showing people where the main hall was. So now, and for this particular temple complex, this is the marking out of where they had the main hall. So if this ever got destroyed, they'd be able to recreate it. So you'll see these markers at different temples, but do you think that the markers are exactly the same at every single temple? Why?
Impermanence.
Impermanence, right? They can't be the same, right? Because they're going to be different from place to place. So the markers are different, but you'll see the similar thing where they're going to be marking out in the 8 directions of the compass. But because of impermanence, constant change, Thais aren't trying to create every single temple exactly the same because they know that that's impossible because of impermanence. But remember, your mind's going to be craving permanence. You're going to want the same things over and over and over again, but you're not going to be able to acquire that. And when you don't get what you want, your mind's going to get angry or frustrated or sad or some other painful feeling. So these are the temple markers. So now we'll go inside. If you guys would like to take off your shoes here, we'll go in and sit down, turn on the fans, relax a little bit, and we'll have a chat inside. Okay? We've got a greeter over here. What's up, buddy? How are you? How are you? How are you, buddy? You doing good today? You doing good? How are you doing? He's a guard dog, maybe. Or the greeter, one of the two. He's like, I thought you guys were going to just stand over there.
I know.
I was having a nice little nap. Temple. So if the monks are going to have some kind of event, it will typically be here. But as you see, a lot of these temples, they're actually empty, right? There's not things going on because we're at this low point in society where the Buddha described this during his lifetime, that the teachings would reach this low point that we're in now. And we're at this point where not many people understand the teachings or are practicing the teachings. So here, if there is going to be an event, it would actually be here at this particular location typically. And what you've got here is you've got some various things, and I'll teach you guys these various things. And there's even some kind of cultural protocols that the Thais follow, and I'll teach you those things. But remember, if you're around a particular event and Thai people are getting angry or frustrated at you, you're not causing that anger or frustration, right? They do have certain cultural protocols, and it's wise to kind of know about these things and practice these things, but you shouldn't feel like you have to or you're required to. right? But if somebody gets angry at you for not doing a particular thing, then just know that it's their mind that's causing that. So I'll share with you a few things that are going to help you when you're in an environment like this. The first one is that when you're around the Buddha statues, typically people will keep their head a little bit lower than the Buddha statues. And that's usually pretty easy because they put the Buddha statues up so high. The next thing is that they usually, when they gesture to a statue of the Buddha, they will usually use a full hand rather than a pointing of a finger. And the reason why is because Thai tradition, they think that the Buddha is actually sitting there. When they see a statue, they think that the spirit of the Buddha is embodied in those statues and that the Buddha is physically sitting there. This is why you'll oftentimes see people feeding statues. This isn't something that the Buddha taught. Remember, he didn't teach to create statues of him. He didn't teach that his spirit is in these statues. He didn't teach to feed the statues. But because of folk traditions and beliefs and things like this, people have changed in some cases what he actually taught. So because Thai people think that the Buddha is actually physically sitting there, if you went up to somebody and pointed your finger in their face, you might consider that to be rude. So that's where Thai people think that way too. But if you pointed at a Buddha statue, I'm not going to get angry, I'm not going to get frustrated, but somebody else may. And it's always nice to be around people who are friendly and polite and cordial and friendly and respectful. So you might decide to do that, is gesture with a full hand. Another thing that they do is they tend to sit with their feet tucked in, either in cross-leg or they tuck them in behind them or something like that. Because during ancient times and even now, sometimes people walk around barefoot outside and your feet would get very dirty. So when you come into an environment like this, if you're pointing your feet at somebody, the Thai people consider it to be disrespectful. Same thing if you're pointing it toward the Buddha or the statues. If you're sitting with your feet pointing at me or at the statues, no worries, you can sit however you like. You're never going to see me angry at anything. So do whatever you like to do. You can sit with your feet pointing at me all day long. I don't think of it in any other way than there's some feet and there they are, right? That's it. But just know that if you're in an environment around certain people, these are some things to keep in mind. So here what we've got is we've got a whole collection of different Buddha statues because the Thai people think the more of something you have, the more powerful it is. So oftentimes you'll see many statues of the Buddha. And we've got the different regions represented here. This black one on the far right, that's very decorative and very ornate, this is the La Na style. This is the Chiang Mai style, the northern style, right? Then in the top one, the big dark black one, this one is the Sukhothai style. When the Sukhothai style, when you see that, it's going to be very simple, it's going to be very clean line, and it's going to have a pointed top on the head. This is during the time when they were in Sukhothai. Then the one right in the middle, the golden one with the rounded head, the golden one right here in the middle, this is the Ayutthaya style that you'll see that they make them in this fashion when they move to Ayutthaya. So we've got the La Na style, Chiang Mai style, we've got the Sukhothai style, and then we've got the Ayutthaya style in the middle. Sometimes when you come into environments like this, you might see a picture of an individual. This picture over here is King Rama number 9. This is the king prior to the current king. This was the father of the current king. And this particular king was very loved and beloved by the Thai people because he became king very early in his life at the age of 26, and he was king all the way up until he died. And at the time of his death, he was the longest reigning monarch anywhere in the world. And he was never really supposed to be the king. He was actually off in America studying at MIT to be an engineer, and they came to him and shared with him that, hey, you're going to be the king. So he needed to come back to Thailand to be the king. So when he came back to Thailand, he assumed the role as being the king, and he was very beloved by the Thai people because he dedicated his life to public service, that he would oftentimes be initiating projects to help people. Here in Thailand, once you get to 40 years old as a woman, it's very hard to get a job oftentimes, so he created environments where people could get jobs. As a woman that was 40 years old, he helped them to get training, he created companies and different things like this, kind of social projects to be able to allow women to work and make money. And he did other things like this. There were times when entire villages were flooded and the government couldn't figure out how to solve the problem. And the villagers' homes were being destroyed, their crops were being destroyed, and they came to the king and asking for his help. Because the king isn't like, going to peer into local politics. They just stay away from that kind of stuff. They're kind of like an advisor. If the government ever would like help, they can go to the king. So the government couldn't solve the problem of flooding, so they went and talked to the king. And the king's an engineer. He graduated from MIT. So he went out to where the flooding was. He rolled up his pants leg. He got out his sketch pad. He got out his camera. He started taking pictures and sketching things and explaining to them what they needed to do. They implemented his ideas, and then the water flowed and it saved the village. So he did multiple projects like this where people were just surprised that the king would go out into the floodwater, rolling up his pants legs and helping people to understand how to solve this issue. So he was very beloved because he practiced the teachings very closely. He was practicing very well. He was generating lots and lots of wholesome dhamma. He only ever had one wife. He was a family man. He really took good care of the Thai people and making sure that he was helping and initiating projects that would help the Thai people. So whenever you come into an environment, you might actually see pictures of this king. Here at a temple, we see the picture of King Rama number 9 being a monk because he was a monk for a period of time. A lot of Thai males will become monks for a period of time. When I go get my hair cut at my barber shop, there's a picture of the king getting his hair cut, right? So no matter where you're at, you might actually see a picture because people love the king so much. It's kind of like, see, the king likes Buddhism, so maybe you should too. See, the king gets his hair cut, so maybe you should too, right? So this is kind of like a way to help people see like, hey, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for you too, if people really beloved this individual. Here at this temple, if you ordain at pretty much anywhere, you get 2 robes and you usually get a bowl like this. This is kind of what you get as an ordained practitioner. And this is the way you sustain your life. As an ordained practitioner, you would walk down the street, and if people would like to donate something to you, they would donate here in your bowl. This is a way for the individual as an ordained practitioner to not have central desire and crave to eat certain foods. You just eat whatever is given to you. That way your mind is trained not to have central desire. But it's also for the household practitioners to practice generosity. That every day, if they would like, they can practice generosity by giving a little bit of food to the ordained practitioners. So there's this mutual support that the Buddha created during his lifetime, that the ordained practitioners are sharing teachings, or a teacher is sharing teachings, and the students are then supporting the teachers and supporting the ordained practitioners. Because if we support individuals to share these teachings, then they can come into the world more and more. Whereas if we didn't support people to bring the teachings into the world, they wouldn't be able to come into the world. So this is one of the ways that people practice generosity, and the ordained practitioners are practicing the elimination of central desire by just walking down the street and accepting whatever is given to them. So this is something that you're giving. You're given 1 bowl and 2 robes. And then you're wearing 1 robe, and you will have washed your other one, and it's hanging to dry. So if we walk through the area where the monks live, you'll see 1 robe that's hanging to dry, and they're wearing the other one. And then tonight, they will wash that one, and then they will get the other one and wear that the next day. And that's essentially what you have as an ordained practitioner. Nowadays, of course, they have phones and they have other things like this, but this is essentially the core things that you're given is 2 robes and a bowl. And that way your mind has less and less opportunity to have attachment. You can have possessions and you can have relationships and not be attached to it, but in terms of being ordained, they're creating the best environment possible for your mind to be able to let go of all the material possessions that you have. So that's why you're just having 1 bowl and 2 robes. Okay? Do you guys have any questions on anything that's here? Yep. In order to get to enlightenment, you'll be able to have relationships. You just need to learn how to not crave and not be attached and not hold on to these things, wanting them to be permanent. Because people are going to be coming and going in and out of your life. As an ordained practitioner, they walk away from all their relationships, even if they're a parent. They're going to walk away, and now these children essentially aren't your children anymore. You're walking into this life of homelessness. But as a household practitioner, you can still get to enlightenment and maintain relationships. You just need to learn how to train your mind to not be attached in your relationships.
And one more question, right at the start when you came here, you said that Buddhism is in the low way, and that Buddha he said it will happen. And how do you look into the future? So what do you think is going to happen?
So an individual who gets to enlightenment, they have eliminated the pollutions out of their mind, and now their mind is functioning optimally, and now the mind is very pure. And some enlightened beings, not just a Buddha, but even just average enlightened beings, oftentimes can know the future. But it's not that it's like destiny or fate. It's that there's still cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, and all these things happening. But because your mind is now purified, you can see more of what's going on in the world. And the Buddha described that 2,500 years after his death, we would reach this low point in society of where his teachings would be vastly misunderstood by countless people. So he understood that because his mind was more clear, more pure, and he was able to see what was going to happen in a future period of time.
Okay, and what's going to happen afterwards? So does he have like any thoughts about that as well?
Yeah, he taught that there's going to be a new Buddha who comes into the world. This Buddha is referred to as Maitreya Buddha, where Maitreya means is loving kindness, that this individual is going to have an extensive amount of loving kindness for the world and helping the world to be able to now restore his teachings back into the world in such a way that countless people can get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime and then after their death. The Buddha knew that his teachings would reach the entire world and ultimately the entire world would become enlightened, but it wouldn't be during his lifetime because there are certain things that didn't exist during his lifetime that exist now that makes this actually possible. Because the Buddha taught in a very localized language that only the people in that region of the world could understand. So his teachings weren't able to reach the entire world during that time, and he wasn't able to travel as well because not everybody understood kind of an international language. Like now we have English, which is an international language that the teachings are able to be shared. So this individual, Maitreya Buddha, would come into the world, get to enlightenment by themselves, and then start sharing their teachings to help countless people be able to get to enlightenment. And that would ultimately restore the teachings back in the world in such a way that the teachings could continue, for the rest of humanity.
Just for my understanding, so you are currently waiting for another Buddha, right?
I am not waiting for another Buddha.
Monks in general, no?
Certain people are aware that there is a new Buddha that is going to come into the world and share teachings to help countless people get to enlightenment.
Okay, as one person.
As one person, yep. And if you look at Christianity, Christianity is waiting for Jesus Christ to be reborn. Muslim teachings have someone that they're waiting for. Judaism. If you ask me and you look at all these things, it's actually the same person. They're just referring to them in different ways. And this individual can restore the teachings back into the world in such a way that all of humanity essentially becomes like heaven on earth. Because if everybody was enlightened in the world, that would be heaven on earth. And you can see these different things in different scriptures and traditional texts. And in my opinion, they're all pointing to the same individual.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sure.
My question was, is it a requirement for the kings of Thailand to practice Buddhism or reach enlightenment before they're allowed to leave?
They are required to be Buddhist. A king's required. I don't know if you guys heard that. She asked, is it a requirement for kings in Thailand to be Buddhist or to get to enlightenment before becoming a king? And the answer is yes, they're required to be Buddhist, that you can't be king if you're not Buddhist, but they're not required to get to enlightenment because everybody's going to journey at different paces and not everybody's going to get to enlightenment prior to any particular time frame, but they do require you to be Buddhist. It's part of the Thai law that in order to be king, you're required to be Buddhist. Essentially, Thai people have decided all throughout multiple generations, we are going to be a Buddhist country, and that's the way we are. And if you'd like to lead us, you need to be Buddhist, and that's the way they've set it up.
So King Rama was a monk prior to going to the U.S. to study at MIT and prior to becoming king?
I don't know that this was before him going to MIT. I suspect this was after, but it could have been before. We don't necessarily know. I don't know. I mean, imagine if we saw the date, we would know for sure. But at some point during your development as a male, oftentimes they will ordain for a week or two or a month or two, or some will do it longer. And this is almost like coming of age, that as a male, it's kind of like, you're going to get ordained at some point. And not everybody, of course, gets ordained, but ordination isn't a lifelong pursuit. It's not a lifelong decision because it's not a permanent decision. So oftentimes people will do temporary ordination. So this was probably like a few weeks or a few months maybe after he knew he was going to become a king or beforehand, we're not sure. But this is a typical thing that Thai males will do. Have a question?
So, in day-to-day, like everyday life, we see the monks out on the streets and getting these food or something, and then they seem to do a little prayer or something, and the people stand like this. Can you explain, please, what they do?
Sure. So I'll explain to you what it is, but it's not what the Buddha taught. Okay. So what the Buddha would do is he would just walk down the street and he would just accept the offering and then he would keep going, right? Because what they're doing there is they think that they're blessing the person and the person thinks that they're getting a blessing. What a blessing is like to receive God's favor, right? And the idea that any human being can bless another human being involves the ego. You would have to have a lot of arrogance in your mind to think that I can now bless this person and something wonderful is going to happen to them because of my blessing, right? This is not what the Buddha taught, but the monks have gotten further and further away from the teachings of the Buddha over time, and that's what they're doing, is they think that they're giving a blessing and the person thinks they're getting a blessing. What the Buddha taught is that if you're receiving food and you're receiving donations, what you should give back is the teachings, because that's what's going to help you. Is if you learn the teachings and you train your mind and you cultivate wisdom and you get to closer and closer to enlightenment, that's what's going to help you. Somebody standing there just mumbling a few words or saying a few chants, that's not going to actually help you in your life. You need to have wisdom to be able to train your mind and cultivate your mind so you can make wiser decisions that produces wholesome results. So that's what he taught people to do, but you don't oftentimes see that today because we're at this low point in society.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wouldn't it be beneficial for them, for the Buddha, rather than just accepting the food and carrying on, to express gratitude and also provide teachings at a later time?
Yeah, that's what you do is, you say thank you, right?
Okay,
You
so
say-
he would still
say-
provide like a gratitude. He wouldn't just accept it and carry on.
When I say carry on, I mean, of course you're going to say
Okay.
thank you when somebody gives you something.
I was picturing him just like walking by,
bolting away. No,
like
that's
the
not-
bowl's
that's
full,
not what he
great, I'm
taught.
turning around.
Yeah, no. Of
Okay.
course, you're going to express gratitude and appreciation, and you're just going to keep on going.
Okay.
And oftentimes, he would be living alongside of his students. Like they would invite him into the home, and he would live at their home for like a week or two or a month or two, and they would be feeding him like right along when they're eating. They would feed him first, and then after he was done eating, then they would eat. So he would express gratitude. You can see it in his teachings that he would say thank you for the food, and then after he ate, after they ate, then he would deliver a teaching, and that's how he would do it. But if he was walking down the street, he would just walk down the street, accept the offering, say thank you, and then keep on going.
Okay.
And then people would know, like, okay, he's going to be teaching, 3 days from now at this location, and we'll go see him and learn his teachings at that point.
So you're saying that the monk blessing on the front of my motto is not protecting me?
No, the only thing that's going to protect you, is your wise decisions, right? So I used to drive around in my car in America with a Buddha amulet hanging from the rearview mirror, and that doesn't stop you from getting into an accident. What stops you is that you look at it every once in a while and you remember, be patient, be calm, let me drive safely. But people don't understand that they think it's the Buddha image that's protecting them or the blessing on the front of the motorbike, but what's really protecting you is your wise decisions. And that's what's so important for you to be able to see, because let's just say you went out into the world thinking that thing's going to protect you, and you were just driving, not that you do this, but you're just driving crazy, and then you get in an accident, and you're like, man, this Buddhism stuff is like no good. Well, that's not Buddhism, So if we went around with the delusion or the confusion thinking that these things are helping us, then we don't see the real true natural law of dhamma, of cause and effect. All right. No more questions? All right. So this was a great conversation. You have a question? No? Okay. This is a great conversation. So let's close up here, and then I'll show you guys some more. Where Buddhism, Thai astrology, and Thai folk traditions are all merging together. And this is something, again, that the Buddha didn't teach, but I'll teach it to you so that you understand when you see these kinds of things at the temple. That, again, this is where like Buddhism, Thai folk tradition, and Thai astrology is all merging together. what you've got here is a bunch of Buddha statues representing each day of the week. And what Thai people believe is that depending on what day of the week you were born on, like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that there's a certain Buddha statue associated with your particular day of the week, and you should respect that Buddha statue more than others, and this is going to produce some kind of beneficial result for you, right? But this isn't what the Buddha taught. If anybody's looking and counting, there's actually 8 Buddha statues up here. So you might say, hold on a second, what's happening? I thought there's 7 days of the week. Well, in Thai astrology, Wednesday is like a really complicated day. So there's like a morning Buddha and there's an evening Buddha. So there needs to be extra things there. So this isn't what the Buddha taught. Remember, he didn't teach to create Buddha statues of him. He didn't teach to worry about the future. He didn't teach auspicious and superstitious things. He taught you to gain wisdom and train your mind and make wise decisions. That's what he's teaching you. So here you'll see this in different places, but just know what it is and that it doesn't represent the actual teachings of the Buddha. And here you've got Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. This is Wednesday morning, Wednesday evening, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And that's how they're all structured. In some places you go to, they're going to be completely different. They're going to be lined up differently, right? But this is not what the Buddha taught, and oftentimes these are kind of being pushed back to the corner of the temples because more and more people realize that it's not what the Buddha taught. So you're going to see them sometimes, but they're starting to get pushed back more and more because people are learning that it's not what the Buddha taught. Okay. So what we're going to do now is go over here, and I'll teach you guys something over here.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah,
about those?
sure.
So is every Wednesday statue same as so every Thursday statue always looks the same?
Yeah.
Okay, and is it connected to a different action you have on the day, or why especially this position? You know?
Oh, I don't know why they picked which Buddha statue for which day.
It doesn't.
It doesn't matter, truthfully, because it's not going to produce anything beneficial for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Teach you guys about these big snakes because you're going to see them at a lot of temples. This is another one of those stories that it's a story and it may or may not be true, but you can extrapolate lessons from it if you understand the story and you understand the path to enlightenment. That I wasn't there. I don't know that the story is true, but I don't know that it's false either. But I'll share it with you and then I'll help you extrapolate the lessons. So it's said that during the lifetime of the Buddha, there was this big snake that was so close to being reborn in the human realm that it could transition itself to look like a human. That it would transition itself to look like an ordained practitioner, and then it would go into the discourses with the Buddha and try to learn his teachings. So this snake transitioned itself to look like a monk, and it went into the area where the Buddha was teaching, and it was listening to the teachings and trying to learn the teachings to be able to get to enlightenment. What was common during this lifetime is the Buddha would teach for really long periods of time, and people's minds would have to be working to be able to understand that, and now they would oftentimes fall asleep. Like you might associate falling asleep as being disrespectful if you fell asleep in someone's class. If you fall asleep in my class, I don't see it as disrespectful. You do whatever you would like to do, because I know that the mind is working hard and you might need to get a little nap and get a little sleep. But when people would fall asleep, the Buddha would just stop teaching and he would wait for people to wake up and then he would just start teaching again. So when this snake was in there looking like an ordained practitioner and everybody had fallen asleep, including this snake, because it fell asleep and its consciousness wasn't quite as attentive, it transitioned to looking back like a snake without realizing it because it was sleeping. And now as the ordained practitioners were waking up and they saw this snake, they were afraid and they were fearful. And they went and got the Buddha. And the Buddha is enlightened. So an enlightened being doesn't have any fear whatsoever. Not even the fear of death or fear of anything. They already are enlightened, so there's no fear whatsoever. So the Buddha comes over and he sees the snake and he's like, silly snake, like, what are you doing? Why are you here? And he's like, I want to get to enlightenment. And the Buddha's like, you can't get to enlightenment. You're in the animal realm. You need to be reborn into the human realm. And that's where you can actually train your mind to get to enlightenment. And the snake's like, yeah, I know. I would still like to learn your teachings. And he's like, well, everybody around here is getting fearful. It would be better if you just went outside and left, and then I can teach these people and they can get to enlightenment. And then on your next life, because it looks like you're very close to being reborn in the human realm, in your next life, that's when you can learn my teachings and get to enlightenment. And the snake's like, okay, that's what I'll do. I'll go outside. But since you won't let me be in here to learn the teachings, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to stand guard. And if there's anybody who's going to enter in to learn with you and they have ill will, I'm not going to let them enter. And the Buddha's like, okay, whatever you like to do, you do it. So having ill will towards the teachings would be to be interested in changing the teachings. If you were to change the teachings of the Buddha, this would cause harm to you, and it would cause harm to many countless other people. So here, I don't know whether this story is true or false, but that's why you've got these snakes here at the base of the stairs, because at one time they used to teach up there, and the idea is that, okay, these snakes are standing guard. And what it's reminding you is that if you're going to go in, don't have ill will towards the teachings of the Buddha, that you're not interested in changing the teachings. You're interested in learning them and training your mind, understanding them, practicing, and be able to get to enlightenment. It also can remind you that thank goodness you're human, because you're in this realm that you can get to enlightenment. You've been in the animal realm most likely countless times, but now you're human. Don't let this life go to waste. Don't allow it to have complacency. And the third thing it can remind you of is that enlightened beings don't have any fear whatsoever. That the Buddha knows that he didn't cause any harm to this snake, so no harm's going to come to him. So no reason to be afraid of it, right? Oftentimes your mind is craving existence. You're craving something and you might be afraid and your mind's shaken up and now you make unwise decisions. Whereas if you know, like, hey, I didn't cause any harm to this snake, there's no harm that's going to come to me. If you see the natural law of karma very clearly, you can exist in the world without any fear. But it takes training to get your mind to that point. So these are the three things that it can remind you of, right? Thank goodness you're human. It can remind you that enlightened beings don't have any fear and that you're not interested in having ill will towards the teachings, which would be to change the actual teachings. Okay, so I'm going to go up here with you guys. The stupa is up here. There's nothing for me to particularly say about the stupa other than these are built all over the Buddhist world to kind of mark out, that, hey, this is Buddhist land. Sometimes people stand there and they kind of look at the stupa and they try to figure out the symbolism. The only person who really truly knows is the artists themselves. But you can maybe look at it, you can see like 4 levels, maybe 4 stages of enlightenment or the 4 noble truths or things like this. You can try to figure those things out. You can walk around if you like. After we walk around up there and you guys have a chance to look at that, we're going to come down the stairs and go to the tunnels over here. So whatever amount of time you guys would like to take up here, we can go up here and I'll just stand up here if you guys have any questions, but you guys can just take your time and walk around and see what you like.
What's the difference between a chedi and a stupa?
A chedi, you can usually go into them, whereas stupa is a solid structure that might have something inside of it, but you can't physically go into it. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's go up. Give you guys an update about what we're doing here. So here, I let you guys go visit the tunnels if you guys would like to see the tunnels. In here, there's about 5 minutes, 10 minutes worth of walking through. You can see these old tunnels. There's a museum that explains more about the tunnels. If you guys would like to see that on the way out, here you can actually just go in and take a look and check them out. If you would like to go in the tunnels, they usually ask that you give a 20 baht donation because it helps them to maintain things and keep things nice. Whether you choose to do that or not, it's your choice. I've been in here many times. It's really nice. It's probably a nice thing for you to take a look at since you're here. I'm going to wait for you out here at the tables. And then when you guys come out, then we'll meet over here at the pillar and then I'll talk about that and we'll decide what to do from there. So if you guys would like to go in, they ask for a 20 baht donation to help them maintain the temple. And then enjoy yourself and come out whenever you're ready. So this pillar over here, this is a pillar in honor of someone named King Ashoka. King Ashoka is accredited with being the person who helped to spread the teachings of the Buddha outside of what we would consider India. That during his lifetime, he lived about 200 or 300 years after the death of the Buddha. He was a very murderous king. He was a very powerful king. And he went around conquering land, and he would send his soldiers, his strong military, to conquer a particular land. And he would destroy these places. And he basically conquered all of India and beyond. He had a huge land. And When he came in contact with the teachings of the Buddha, he had this complete transformation where he became more loving and kind. He stopped going out and destroying land and being murderous and conducting wars, and instead he used his riches and his power to spread the teachings of the Buddha. So he sent out missionaries all throughout the world to be able to share the teachings of the Buddha. And he ended up building 84,000 pillars in honor of the Buddha. So if you go where the Buddha was born, he built a pillar to the Buddha's mom. If you go to where the Buddha maybe had a particular thing or another, he would have constructed a pillar for that particular thing. So now, because of his dhamma, whatever you put out comes back to you. People are building pillars for him and honoring him for spreading the teachings. Because if it wasn't for King Ashoka, you may not actually have learned the teachings because they hadn't made their way outside of India. So people honor and respect him for being the person who shared the teachings outside of the region where the Buddha actually taught. So in the Buddhist community, people have a lot of respect and gratitude towards King Ashoka. So you'll see pillars built and constructed in honor of him in certain places. This is effectively a Thai cemetery. What Thais usually do is they burn the bodies through cremation, and then oftentimes they will keep the ashes at home. But some people like to put the ashes of their family in a temple like this. And what they would do is they would just go talk to the monks and ask the monks, and the monks would say, sure, go ahead. And then you're responsible as a family member to create whatever you would like to create. So here you can see they created these little individual shrines, and now the family's going to take care of it to whatever degree that they decide to take care of it. Here you can see some of the symbolism. You see the Eightfold Path, the Dhamma wheel on this one. So that's why each one of them are different and unique, because the families are creating them on their own, however they would like to create them. So this is what you would typically see if you would have a Thai cemetery. But oftentimes, the vast majority of people are keeping their ashes at home or spreading them, because if they use this much land for every single person who dies in a small country like Thailand, you'd run out of land pretty quick. Okay, so they don't typically do these kinds of things. But if there's been a person who's maybe been associated with this temple, or maybe it was one of their dying requests to be situated at this temple, maybe their family worked that out for them and was able to get them to do that, because maybe they came to this temple regularly, maybe they supported this temple regularly, and they'd like to be here with the ashes. All right, so now you guys have seen a Thai cemetery.
Yeah.
Cross that one off your list. It was on your bucket list, right, Frank?
It was, yeah.
Oh, you can leave Chiang Mai.
We're taking a cable car up the mountain. Come on, let's go. That's the view if you would like to see. Okay, so now I can welcome you to Wat Doi Suthep. Sawadee-krap, welcome to the temple. So here, this is a very different type of temple. There's two main branches of Buddhism in Thailand. We call it Dhamma Yut and Dhamma Gai. Traditionally, or kind of more layman terms, we say forest temple and city temple, but not all the temples that are considered the city temples are in the city. They're like this. So about 90% of the temples are like this branch of Buddhism, which is very ornate, very flashy, lots of gold. You'll see a very different style of Buddhism here, where the forest temple we were at, you saw the colors were very muted, lots of sandstone, it was very park-like. Already you can see this is a different type of temple, right? So these are the two different branches of Buddhist teachings. At a temple like this, which is 90% of them, they're not known for practicing the teachings as closely as the forest temple. So here, as we walk around, I'm going to be sharing a lot of things that aren't the teachings of the Buddha. Essentially, when the Buddha lived, he taught whatever he taught. And then he helped people to be able to get to enlightenment. After he died, people collected those teachings up, and now we know that this is what the Buddha taught. And then there were these three main schools that were created: Theravada Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, and Vajrayana Buddhism. Theravada means the teachings of the elders. This is considered the form of Buddhism that's closest to the life of the Buddha. And that tradition considers the Pali Canon, the words of the Buddha, to be his original teachings. And that's what you see in Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Sri Lanka, southern Vietnam, but really it's spread all throughout the whole world. But then about 500 to 1,000 years after the death of the Buddha, you see changes and modifications made. And there's a tradition called Mahayana Buddhism that was created. And this is what you see in China. And there's different branches within that as well. You'll see Zen Buddhism and different types of Buddhist teachings. And then when you go even further from the life of the Buddha, about 1,000 years, there's Vajrayana Buddhism, which is what you'll see in Tibet. And what happens is as you get farther and farther away from the teachings of the Buddha, you'll start seeing rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. And these aren't the things that the Buddha actually taught. But even in the Theravada tradition, particularly in this branch of the Theravada tradition, you'll see rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. And I'll show you some of those things when we go inside. But just understand that that's not what the Buddha taught. So this particular temple, because it's visited by so many people all over the world, they've kind of put a little bit of everything to kind of make it accessible to everybody. So you'll see some things that are Theravada, which is like the meditation center. You'll see some things that are Mahayana or Vajrayana Buddhism here. So they're giving a little bit of something for everybody to come because there's millions of people that come here. So this thing behind me is something from a different tradition of Buddhist teachings. But there's only one Buddha, so there can only be one teachings that's from the Buddha. So what I'll share with you here isn't the teachings of the Buddha, but I'll teach you what this is. What people believe, and remember the teachings of the Buddha aren't based in belief, is that if you ring these bells, and if you get it to exactly the right frequency, you'll instantly get to enlightenment. So if you understand what enlightenment is, which is where your mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, and you no longer experience any anger, sadness, or frustration, you don't have to believe what other people say, but you don't have to believe what I say either. Don't believe what I say. Test it out for yourself. Ring the bells and see if you still get angry, if you still get annoyed, if you still get frustrated, and you'll be able to see for yourself. So it says you don't push them, but you can reach under and you can actually ring them if you like. And you can test it for yourself and see whether or not you get to enlightenment. Are you calm? Are you peaceful? Are all your relationships at ease? Are you able to speak very polite and kind and friendly in all situations? Is your mind focused and concentrated and clear? Do you have deep memory? These kinds of things, right? So don't believe anybody, including me, so you can test it for yourself. But you're going to see things like this and others as we go throughout the temple complex that are not the teachings of the Buddha, but I'll explain it to you so you'll know what it is, and when you see it, you'll understand it. So any questions here or any takers? You guys would like to ring the bells? Yeah, go for it. Go ring the bells.
What about this one?
It's like Wheel of Fortune, right?
Do we have
That felt like the opposite of it.
Yeah. Anybody enlightened yet?
It worked.
Let's see if you get angry. Let me take your sunglasses. Okay, so now where I'm going to take you is to an observation deck. There's nothing to talk about Buddhism there, unless you guys have questions. It's just a beautiful view and fresh air. So let's go see the nice view. Yeah, this is the airport right here. And that's the old city over there. The airplane's taking off now.
Oh, and we can see that square, yes.
Yeah, the square. Chiang Mai is like a bowl. It's got mountains all the way around it, and then you're down inside the bowl. That's why the wind doesn't blow very much, because you're down inside the bowl.
And explain this smoky season, maybe? Everything
Yes.
kind of
Yeah,
gets stuck.
exactly. It's very clear today. You can't always see over to the other side.
We're lucky.
The view is impermanent, right? It's
Yes.
not always going to be the same view every day. So this is what I was talking about, moving to a higher consciousness, being able to see more of the world when you move into a higher consciousness. Remember our conversation? Yeah. Okay, you guys ready?
Should we take
Keep
a-
going. You guys about elephants, because in the West we typically see the lion as the king of the jungle, right? And this is kind of like something that we look at as strong and these kinds of things. But a lion is very strong, very powerful, yes, but they're also very angry, very aggressive, and they kill. So in Thailand, they don't really revere the lion as much as they do the elephant. The elephant is a being that has a lot of compassion, love, kindness. It doesn't typically kill, although it can kill, but it doesn't kill for food. And elephants were used all throughout Thai history. They were originally used for agriculture and war. They would take them off into battle and fight with them and use them in farming. But nowadays, with modern equipment, they don't really serve a utility purpose, even though some people still use them for logging and stuff like this. But this is why you see a lot of sanctuaries being built to take care of them. And if you think about an elephant, if you know about enlightenment, how your mind is very concentrated, you have a deep memory and these kinds of things, you can see that the elephant is the animal in the animal world that's closest to being reborn into the human realm as any other animal, because of its qualities of being in that existence. Because to get into the human realm, you know, an individual is being affected by the natural laws regardless, whether you're aware of these natural laws or not. So as an elephant, you're not having to kill to eat. You're usually pretty compassionate and friendly and warm to your other herd mates, so to speak. And because of this, the mind is concentrated. It has deep memory. Elephants are known for that kind of thing. And those are some of the qualities of an enlightened being. So Thais really revere elephants a lot. And this is why you'll see them represented in a lot of different places throughout Thai culture. Okay. So now we'll come around here to this side over here. Okay, so I bring you here because now that you guys know a little bit about Buddhism, you know a little bit about the symbolism and the artwork and statues. When you come to a temple, what you like to do is you just kind of like to look at things and see what you understand. So when you're looking at this, what are things that you're seeing that you've already learned?
The lotus.
The lotus flower, what does that represent?
Enlightenment.
Enlightenment, right? What else do you see?
Head is very high, so you're under it.
Yep, exactly.
Then the position that he has his feet closed.
His feet closed, which one?
Are the sitting Buddha.
Oh, this one, this,
Yeah, sorry,
the meditation position, yeah. Is this the way the Buddha looked when he was alive? Did he walk around with fancy clothes and a crown on his head and stuff like that? No, he didn't. What style is this? What style of Buddha images are these? What did you say? A Uttiya. You're thinking a Uttiya, not a Uttiya. What? Not a Uttiya. Not Sukhothai. Ah, okay. Process of elimination, right? All right. So the Lat Na style, the northern style, is going to be very ornate, very decorative like this. This is what you'll see in the Lat Na style. And because we're up here in the north, it makes sense that you see a lot of Lat Na statues, a lot of northern statues. You go down to the Sukhothai region and kind of around that area, you'll see a lot of Sukhothai images. You go to a Uttiya, you'll see a lot of Uttiya images. So up here, you're going to see a lot of Lat Na style images. And they're going to be very ornate and very decorative like this. But the Buddha never looked like this during his life. Maybe perhaps when he was a prince, he dressed like this, but at that point, he wasn't a Buddha. Right? This is after he's gotten to enlightenment, he wouldn't have worn things like this. In fact, there's a story that a student offered him a very luxurious, very fancy fabric during his life, and he accepted the offering because he would always accept generosity. And then he gave it to one of his students, and he asked the student to rip it up, sew it back together, and then make a robe out of it because he wasn't interested in walking around with fancy fabrics. So he didn't wear even this kind of stuff because this is way more fancy than just a fabric, a really nice fabric. So this building behind me, this is an ordination hall. So there's usually at a temple, there's a main hall, like we saw at Wat Umong, that main one that we went into, the sala, the main hall with the markers around it. You guys remember back then? Yeah. So that's the main hall, that's the sala. But then off to the side, there can be a smaller building like this. This is an ordination hall. So if you were going to get ordained at this temple, you would need to build a relationship with the monks that are currently here. And you might have grown up in this area, you might have been coming here and visiting them for a long time, and you have built up a relationship. And at some point you might decide, hey, can I ordain? And then those monks are going to talk with you, have discussions with you, talk with your family, and see if it's a right fit. Because if they're accepting you into the community, they're taking on the responsibility to teach you and guide you. And that's a big responsibility, to teach people how to get to enlightenment. So if they say yes and they agree, there's going to be 10 preceptors. These 10 preceptors are 10 people that are supporting you to become ordained. And these are already existing ordained practitioners. So if you're going to be ordained on the day of your ordination, you will go into this building with the 10 preceptors. And then they spend some time in there and then they come out. And when they come out, you're an actual monk at that point. So these 10 preceptors, these are individuals that no matter what you do in Buddhism, no matter where you travel as a monk, you always have 10 people that you can ask help from, because these 10 people, they're not going to be monks their whole life potentially, and people come and go. So by having 10, you at least have somebody that you can reach out to, because you might stay at one temple for a number of years, but then over time you might decide to travel and go other places and learn from other masters and other teachers. So this particular temple might be your primary temple, but then you have other temples that you go to and learn with other people. But if you ever have any challenges, you can call one of your preceptors or contact one of your preceptors, and then they will help you to be able to continue on the path, whatever that is. You'll have a master teacher at the temple that's your teacher, but then there's other community members that you can receive help from as well. The only time that the doors to this building are open is when the people are actually walking in and when they're walking out. Otherwise, they keep them closed. The only reason why you would go in here is if you're going to get ordained. So if you haven't been ordained, you would never have been in one of these. So the temple where I teach, they have a little building like this. They don't ordain people there anymore, but they do have a ordination hall next to the main hall. But not every temple ordains. Some temples do, some temples don't. So if you were going to ordain, you would need to find a place to do that. What you see in Thailand is you see a lot of male monks. And the reason why is because we think that Buddhism came from Sri Lanka and it came over into Thailand, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were females and males who were ordained. And in Sri Lanka, there's females that are ordained there. And when Buddhism came over to Thailand about 800 to 1200 years, it came by sea. And we think that the females didn't come with the males because there was never an established female ordained community here. But in the last 20 years, there's been some females that have been trying to revitalize the ordained path for females. And down in Bangkok, there's a temple that is dedicated to female ordination. And there's about 300 or 400 women that are ordained there. And the first woman who got ordained here in Thailand, she's still alive. She's like, I think in her 60s or something like that. So she got ordained about 20 years ago. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, women got ordained because he knew that that was important for women to have that womb to develop in. And nowadays, it's available in different places, and they're revitalizing it here in Thailand, which is great that's occurring. So a female would need to have females and males present in order to become ordained, and they're revitalizing that here in Thailand. So you guys see the little snakes here on the building, right? You guys know what that is from the other temple. Anything else you guys would like to ask here at the ordination hall? Any questions about it? About the hall or ordination? I'm sure it does, but I'm not sure what it is. Yeah, the artist would know. Yeah, you see a lot of animals around Buddhism, and the reason why is it's reminding you of, thank goodness you're not an animal anymore. You're human. You can get to enlightenment. Don't be complacent. But I think, like you're probably thinking, each animal probably has a certain significance to somebody somewhere. But the Buddha didn't teach those kinds of things. But over time, the folk traditions kind of developed that.
I know, I saw that.
Durian are a lot more spiky. Do you see any?
Spikier, yeah, there's some gum on the other side.
Yeah, there's usually a bunch hanging right here, but it's a jackfruit tree. Yeah. It would be dangerous to stand under a durian tree because if one of those fell on your head. Oh. Okay, can you guys see? You guys can come up if you like. I can stand behind you if you like, or I can stand over here to the side. This is very rare to see at a temple. What this is this is a little shrine for what we might call medicine men, or what would we call them? Hermits, right? This is like traditional medicine doctors who live in the forest and they practice herbal medicine. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, the very first herbal doctor was the doctor to the Buddha. And nowadays, if you're doing anything related to traditional medicine, they will respect the original doctor of the Buddha as being the founder of their medicine. And then there's other kind of hermits or medicine people, traditional herbalists, who are respected as well. So if you're into like traditional herbal medicine or Thai massage or any of these kinds of things, you might have a little shrine in your massage center for these people, and they might do like meditation or chanting or things like this around the little shrine. And when there's one at a temple like this, they might actually make offerings here, because these medicine people, they do practice a little bit of Buddhism. They feel like the more that they practice Buddhism, the more that their medicine is going to be more powerful, more potent. So I'll explain to you the story behind the original doctor of the Buddha. The original doctor of the Buddha, his name in Thai, we refer to him as Mal Shivok, or in Pali, we refer to him as Javaka Komarabaka. And if you study Thai massage, you'll learn about him because they consider him to be the founder of their medicine. Well, this doctor that lived during the lifetime of the Buddha was going to treat the Buddha for an illness. And the Buddha was making his way to this doctor, and word got in front of the Buddha and they were advising this doctor, like, hey, the Buddha's coming to visit you. And he's like, oh yeah, really? Is he really truly a Buddha, right? Because he didn't know whether he was actually a Buddha or not. And then when the Buddha came, he told the doctor what his ailments are and what his symptoms are. And the doctor said, okay, here's the medicine, here's the herbal medicine that you need to take. You take this medicine and you're going to poop 29 times. And after you poop 29 times, if you're truly a Buddha, you will know what to do next to heal yourself. So the Buddha, okay, he knew he was a Buddha. Okay, thank you. He walked away. He went and took the medicine and he pooped 29 times. And then he ended up figuring out what to do to heal himself. And he comes back to the doctor and he thanks the doctor. He's like, thank you so much. You've helped to heal me. You're such a great doctor. I appreciate everything. And the doctor said, well, what did you do to heal yourself? What was it that you had to do? What did you figure out? He said, I had to poop one more time. I had to poop 30 times. And when I pooped the 30th time, that's what actually healed me. So again, whether this story is true or not, I don't know. But this is an interesting story to share. But this is where the founding of the traditional medicine in Thailand is considered to be. So they will connect their traditional herbal medicine and massage and Yam King and Toksin and all these different traditional medicines. They will connect it over to Buddhism in this way. So you might hear about Dr. Javaka Komara Bhakta or Mo Shiwo. This is the Thai way of referring to him. And when you see the animal prints on the statues, this is depicting what we refer to in Thai as a lu si, or in India they call them rushi, right? So this is the traditional medicine doctors that people are paying respect to. And it's very rare to see one of these at the temple, but this temple includes a little bit of everything for everybody. Everybody's welcome. Okay. All right, so now we're going to go inside, and there's a really nice mural that goes all the way around the outside of the building inside that tells the life story of the Buddha. So I will walk you picture by picture and tell you the whole life story of the Buddha. They ask us to take off our shoes before we go inside, so if you guys would like to take off your shoes, and then we can go inside and I'll meet you right inside. Okay, so whenever you guys come into a new environment like this, it's always nice to kind of look around and see if there's anything that you notice from the symbolism that you know. Right, so you can look up to the ceiling and see if there's something that you identify, right? And now you understand what this means. So it's not just a pretty decoration anymore. It's like, oh, I understand what that means now. Well, this shape right here of this leaf, this is the shape of a leaf. This is the shape of the leaf of the tree that the Buddha sat for 7 weeks and contemplated whether or not he was going to share his teachings. The Bodhi tree, this is the shape of that leaf. And you can see on the bell, the bottom part of the bell, it's the same shape. So that's reminding you of enlightenment as well. It's a symbol of enlightenment. So you'll see these kind of symbolism around different places.
Is the Buddha meditating here?
This is the one that he's reaching down to the ground that I taught you. No, you see his eyes are open.
Okay.
He's reaching down to the ground to perform that first and only miracle that he performed. The one I taught you about from the other temple.
The animals.
Yeah. So this mural is behind here. In some places it's exposed, but here, the first one that I'll talk to you about is about the birth of Siddhartha Gautama. At the time, his mother was the queen and she was married to the king. And during this time frame, when you were getting ready to deliver a baby, they would take you home to your homeland. They organized a caravan and they were taking her home. And as they were taking her home in order to deliver the baby, she goes into labor. And they stop the caravan and she gets out and she comes over to this tree and she holds on to the branch and she's trying to deliver the baby out through the birthing canal. But he wouldn't come out. So he breaks through the side of her stomach. That's why she's holding her hand on the side of her stomach. And she ends up dying 7 days later because of this. Nowadays, we would just do a C-section and it would be no problem whatsoever. But they didn't have that technology back then. So she ends up dying 7 days later. And because death of the mother wasn't uncommon during this time frame, they actually had protocols in place that if you die during childbirth, your siblings would adopt your child. So her older sister adopted Siddhartha Gautama as her own child. So his aunt was his stepmother. It's said in the original text that as soon as he was born, he walked 7 steps, lotus flowers blossomed under his feet, and he spoke and he said, "This will be my last birth." But I think this is an embellishment of the story, because if this was actually true, the next part of the story wouldn't actually be needed. So this is the birth story of the Buddha. But he's not a Buddha yet. He's just Siddhartha Gautama. Okay? So here, what we've got is we've got the king and now his stepmother who have summoned advisors. We might refer to them as fortune tellers, to tell the king what his son was going to become. He was interested to know what his son was going to become. So 108 people came and let him know what was going to go happen with his son during his life. 107 of those people said to the king, your son is going to be a great ruler, a great monarch. He's going to rule over your kingdom, and he's going to expand your kingdom very far and very wide. And his father's like, that's my boy. All right, yeah. Well, there's this one advisor who came in and apologized to the king and said, sir, I'm so sorry. I overheard those other advisors, and they're right. He's going to be a great leader for sure, but he's not going to be a monarch and a ruler. He's going to be a great spiritual leader. And his father didn't like that. His father didn't like that news. So what he decides to sequester his son into the palace and not let him go outside, because he thought that if he went outside into the kingdom, that he would get involved in worldly affairs and he would be interested to be a spiritual leader. But instead, he decides to sequester him into the palace. He gives him like amazing gifts and fabrics and food and entertainment, beautiful women bathing him and taking care of him, everything you can imagine that a rich royal family could give to their son. He gave it to his son in order to try to kind of woo him into the way of being a monarch and a ruler, because he wouldn't be able to get that kind of lifestyle any other way. So that's what he decided to do after hearing the news from this one advisor. So again, if that was true, you wouldn't really need this. You would know your son's special, if there was miracles being performed at birth and stuff like that. Okay, so now from here, Siddhartha Gautama is in the palace for 29 years. Okay, so that's where we go over here. So this one is kind of blocked by this image, but I can explain it to you, and you guys are welcome to look on the sides. At the age of 29, Siddhartha Gautama realizes he's about to become the king, because during this time frame, you would become the king when you turned age 30, and your father would retire, and they would be alongside of you to help you learn how to be a better and better king. So at the age of 29, realizing that he was about to become the king, and he'd never been outside the royal palace, he decides to leave out of the royal palace, and he takes with him his royal attendant. If you happen to see this, there's a person over here like his chief of staff, his main confidant. And he leaves without his father knowing what he's doing. And he has what's called the 4 observations. These 4 observations are that he sees an old person, an old decrepit person. He sees a sickly person. He sees a dead corpse. And then he sees a roaming ascetic, someone who's given up worldly life in order to figure out what's going on in the world and how to help people. So when Siddhartha Gautama sees this old decrepit person, he sees this disgruntledness around them. And he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? And it's like, oh, that person's old, they can't work, they can't get basic supplies for themselves, they can't get food and water and things like this, and that's why that's going on. And this has a big impact to Siddhartha Gautama, because he's been living in the palace. He's been living this great life for so many years, and now here he sees this problems of the kingdom. Then he sees the sickly person, and the same thing there. He sees this disgruntledness, and he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? He's like, yeah, that person can't work. They can't get food. They're going to really struggle. And this was like really impactful to Siddhartha Gautama's mind, because he never had seen that kind of lifestyle before. Then he sees a dead corpse. And once again, people are grieving and having a miserable time, and they're very sorrowful. And he needs to ask his royal attendant what's going on over there. And again, he explains it to him. And then he sees this 4th observation, the roaming ascetic, someone who's trying to understand this sickness, aging, and death. And his royal attendant explains to him, this person is trying to figure out all of this stuff and why this is occurring. And Siddhartha Gautama decides that's what he would like to do, is he would like to help the people. He's not interested in ruling over the population of people, because he saw the kingdom as being full of misery and despair. And he felt like if he was the ruler and the king, he would just be ruling over misery and despair. And he decides he's not interested in that. So he decides he's going to leave the royal palace and go on this journey to figure out why this sickness, aging, and death is occurring, and the discontentedness associated with it. So now we go to the next part. So what this mural is depicting Siddhartha Gautama looking in on his wife and his young infant son, because at this time he was married and he had a young infant son. And he looks in at his wife and his young child, and he decides to leave in the middle of the night. He decides to leave from the palace and give up his worldly life. He doesn't even wake them up, because he Didn't understand the mind very much at that point, but he understood it enough that he felt like if he woke his wife up and his son up and he said goodbye and hugged them, that he would have a hard time to say goodbye. So he just decides to leave in the middle of the night without them actually knowing. So then he leaves from the royal palace. And that's what this one is now depicting. You got a nice clear view of this one, okay? What this is depicting Siddhartha Gautama leaving the palace with his favorite horse, right? He's still attached to his horse. He's holding on to this favorite horse. And he brings with him his royal attendant. So his royal attendant and his favorite horse come with him. And then what this is depicting a being that is a formless being that is referred to as Mara in the teachings of the Buddha. Mara is a formless being that doesn't have physical form, and they're only interested in causing calamity and difficulties in the world. So what this being is interested in doing is influencing people's minds to do unwholesome things, to do unwise things. Other traditions, you might refer to this being as devil or Satan or something like this, or Lucifer. But in the Buddhist teaching, he refers to him as Mara. Because the last thing that Mara is interested in is somebody to go become a Buddha. So this is depicting Mara saying, no, go back, don't come, don't go become a Buddha, go back to the royal palace. So that's what this is depicting. So what we've got depicted here is now Siddhartha Gautama has left the palace and he's starting to shed some of his attachments. His mind is starting to let go. He lets go of his horse and his royal attendant. He says, hey, you've been good, you've been great, but you guys can go. He gives his royal attendant some provisions to be able to take care of him, and he cuts off his hair. During this time frame, if you were a member of the royal family, you would grow your hair very long. And this is how people knew you were part of the royal family. Because us commoners who were working out in the field, we couldn't grow long hair because it would get tangled and knotted and dirty. But the royal family, they had servants to take care of their hair. They could sit around, the servants would comb and brush their hair, detangle it. They would shampoo it for them. So when you went out into the kingdom, people knew you were a member of the royal family. Nowadays, we just put the king's picture everywhere in the kingdom and everyone knows who he is. But they didn't have that technology back then, right? They put the picture of the king on the money now, so you can see what the king looks like. But during this period of time, they didn't have that. So they would grow their hair very long. So him cutting off his hair is like, I'm never going back. Because he's been growing this hair for 29 years. Nobody would ever believe that he was the king if he tried to assume the throne. So cutting off his hair is like, I'm never going back. It also helps you do other things by cutting off our hair. It helps us to realize non-self, to eliminate personal existence view. You don't have to cut off your hair in order to get to enlightenment, but this is one very impactful thing that you can do to detach from your self-image or your self-identity. And this helps to train your mind to be more peaceful and joyful. Again, you don't have to cut off your hair to get to enlightenment, but it is one thing that some people choose to do because it helps train your mind to let go of wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the story here and I'm going to show you guys something that's not the teachings of the Buddha. What we got here is we've got something that isn't the teachings of the Buddha, but I'm going to teach it to you because you're going to see it in some temples. This is a belief that if you shake this, that eventually one stick is going to come out, and you look at the number on the stick, and behind me on the wall there's numbers and there's a little pamphlet of information, and this is supposed to tell you your future. Okay? So I teach you guys, don't believe anything, and don't believe me either. You can test this to know the truth for yourself, because you could shake this and see what number falls out. And if this is true, you should be able to put that stick back in and do it again, and the exact same stick should keep falling out. Because your fortune couldn't have changed within 1 second, right? So if you do that, and you do that 3, 4, 5 times, and you see different sticks are coming out every time, you can see that it's not true, right? The Buddha didn't teach you to worry about the future. He taught you to be in the present moment and find peace and joy and contentment in the present moment. So this is something you'll see in some Buddhist temples. It's very popular among Chinese people. So there's a lot of Chinese people who come here, so they'll do this, right? So I'll show you how it's done in case you would like to play around with it and have fun with it. You just shake it like this. Okay, so this is number, what is that? Number 9 or number 6. Not quite sure. Right? Okay, so now we put it in, and if this is true, we should get exactly the same thing, right? Okay, we've got number 13. Right, so it can't be true, right? Because your fortune can't change that quick, right? So the Buddha never taught this kind of thing, but you'll see it at temples. You'll see different things that aren't the teachings of the Buddha. So it's helpful to see what are the teachings and what aren't the teachings, because then you can actually make your way to enlightenment. But if you do these kinds of things, you're not doing what the Buddha taught to train your mind. So you guys can have fun with it if you like, and you can see yourself, but it's not true. But it's kind of comical sometimes to see what it says. So anybody would like to try? Okay, so when Siddhartha Gautama left the royal palace and he cut off his hair and he let his horse and his royal attendant go, he ends up taking up training with 2 different teachers. There was one teacher that he trains with for an entire year, and this teacher teaches him to hang himself upside down from trees, to lay on beds of nails, to pierce his body with metal implements, to starve himself, and things like this. And the thought was that if you could cause harm and pain to the body and your mind could overcome it, you would get to enlightenment. Because these people were claiming that they had gotten to enlightenment. So Siddhartha Gautama, trying to solve these problems, he decides to take up training with these people. And after 1 year, this first teacher says, "Oh, you've mastered my teachings. You can now teach my teachings." And Siddhartha Gautama realized his mind wasn't any more peaceful than it was when he was in the royal palace. So he goes to the next teacher. And the next teacher essentially is teaching him the exact same things. And now after 1 year, he masters that person's teachings. And again, the teacher says, "Hey, you can teach my teachings. You've mastered what I have to share." And Siddhartha Gautama realizes his mind isn't any more peaceful than it was when it was in the palace. So he's frustrated with these 2 years that he spent all this time and kind of wasting his time. So he goes off into the forest by himself. And now he takes those aesthetic practices really, really far. He gets to the point where he's only eating 1 grain of rice per day. And during this time frame, oftentimes artists will depict him with his ribs protruding, his facial bones protruding. He was essentially skin and bones. He was on death's doorstep. And he was sitting on the edge of the forest meditating, and this mother and her young daughter walk by and they see that he's like on death's doorstep. He's about to die. And they beg and plead with him to eat some rice. And he reluctantly accepts the rice. Sometimes the artist will draw his face looking away because he feels disgusted in himself, like he feels like he's giving up, because he was taught that you had to starve yourself in order to get to enlightenment. But when he starts eating the rice, he has this realization where he realizes that when he was in the palace, he was living this central pleasures. He had everything and anything you could imagine. But when he left, he swung all the way to the other side, and he was living this life of very little existence, right? 1 grain of rice per day. He was on opposite sides. So during this period of time, he realizes there's this middle way, that he could eat in moderation. And this is where his practice starts to really excel, because now he starts training his mind in the middle way. And he figures out how to get to enlightenment during that next 4-year period. So over a total of 6 years, he ends up figuring out how to get to enlightenment. And he knows that his mind's enlightened because his mind's peaceful. It's calm, it's serene, it's content with joy. He knows what anger feels like. He knows what sadness and frustration and grief and misery and despair feels like, but now his mind's not experiencing that. So he knows that he's gotten to enlightenment. But he's not sure if the world is ready to learn what it is that he has to share, because what he had to share was so different. Everybody was hanging themselves upside down from trees and starving themselves and doing all these other things, and he wasn't doing that. So he goes to this tree and he hangs out for about 7 weeks, trying to decide whether or not he's going to share his teachings. Well, we know what he ultimately decided was to share his teachings, and that's why we're here today, is that he did go share his teachings. And that's what I'm going to share with you when we get over there. There's a depiction of him sharing his first teaching. Here, this is a lot of Thai folk tradition around the rest of the temple. But when we get over there, there's a depiction of him sharing his very first teaching. But before we do that, we're going to make another stop so you can see some things that aren't the teachings of the Buddha again, and then we'll go over there and finish up the story. Okay, so I brought you guys in here because there's things that happen here that aren't the teachings of the Buddha that will actually help you to understand what the teachings of the Buddha are. So here, what they do is if you would like to make a donation to the temple, you come in and you make your offering to this monk, and then this monk is going to have this little water, this little urn of water, and you pour it out. And while he's chanting, the thought is that whatever good deed that you did, you're transferring it to your dead relatives. But this isn't what the Buddha taught, because when you're practicing generosity, the benefit is training your mind to be to let go. It's training your mind to not be selfish. You can't transfer those benefits to somebody else. So this is a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony that is not part of the teachings of the Buddha, but you'll see it in various places associated with Buddhism. And then after they do that, they might sprinkle some water on you. This is called namun. It's like blessed water or sacred water. The Buddha didn't teach this. He actually talks in his teachings, because this was going on during his lifetime. And he talks and says, I don't do this, and the reason why. And then they also will tie a string on your wrist, and it's thought that this string has some kind of special powers or something like this. But as you guys have learned through the classroom that you've been learning, is it's all about training your mind. It's about cultivating wisdom. These kinds of things, while they go on, it's not part of the teachings of the Buddha. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were people called Brahmin, which are like Hindu priests, that were doing rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship, and they were being paid for this. And the Buddha knew that these things didn't lead to any kind of beneficial results, but people were doing it. So as they were learning more and more with the Buddha, they learned that these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship that they were paying the Brahmin for, they don't actually lead to better results in your life. It's through training your mind and cultivating your wisdom. But nowadays, the monks have almost become like the Brahmin, that they're performing ceremonies and rituals for money, when in reality, that's not what the Buddha actually taught. He taught you to train your own mind. And that's where, if you learn his discourses, you can learn how to do that, where through training your mind, you can get to the peace and joy of enlightenment. So there's some different things here that you guys might decide to look at. This statue in the middle with the big flame around it, this is from a place called Pechenalok, Thailand. If you guys have been there, there's this temple called Wat Yai. That temple, the Buddha image that's there, that's considered in Thailand to be the most beautiful Buddha image anywhere in the country. And this is a replica of that. Of course, the original one is much nicer than this, but this is just a replica. So if you ever see this one, that is depicting that image from over there. Now we got a little kitty cat. This white image right here, this one is from what style? Do you guys remember?
The Greek.
You're thinking about why they first started making statues. But what period? We have Ladna style, Sukhothai, and Ayutthaya. Claire, do you know what this one is? Over here, the white one? Yeah, this is the Ayutthaya style. Yep. This is just a monk that people would know in the local area. The black one over there, that's the Sukhothai style, the very clean lines, very simple lines. Okay, what we've got here is we've got a depiction of the Buddha now, because he's enlightened, giving his very first teaching. You see the lotus flower underneath of him. This isn't something that actually occurred. This is just the artist's representation, right? They've got him propped up on a pedestal. This isn't what actually occurred. This is the artist's representation of him. In reality, what happened is he was walking from that tree that he was at contemplating for 7 weeks, and he ran into 4 of his previous classmates and 1 of his previous teachers. And they started laughing at him and joking him and mocking him because he had meat on his body. He looked bright. He looked healthy. And to them, to get to enlightenment, you had to be starving yourself. And they looked very old, old and very disgruntled because their bones are protruding and all this kind of stuff. They thought he had given up on enlightenment and went back to the palace. So they laughed and joked and mocked him. He knew he was enlightened. It didn't affect his mind. By the time you get to enlightenment, people can say whatever they would like to say. Your mind's completely peaceful and joyful. So he walks over, he sits down on the ground, he takes his hand and he touches the earth, and he performs that miracle that we talked about, where the animals come to where he's at. You can see the animals coming, the birds, the squirrels, the deer, the lizards, all these different animals came. And these first 5 people were like, okay, you've got our attention. What do you have to say? So he delivers his very first teaching. It's called the Four Noble Truths. This is where in 4 simple statements, he explains the problem that you're experiencing in your mind. He explains the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And in these 4 simple statements, you can independently verify that it's your mind that's causing these discontent feelings. Because how could you ever eliminate your discontentedness if you didn't know what was causing it? It's the craving, desire, attachment. The problem that he discovered is the discontentedness. The conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant, the anger, the sadness, the frustration, all of this is very problematic for a human being to experience. Then the cause of this problem is the craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection. If you get what you want, you feel happy. But if you don't get what you want, you feel sad or frustrated or agitated. And now to eliminate that, you need to eliminate the craving, desire, attachments. And the way that you do that is through the Eightfold Path. That's the core central teaching that is going to help you eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. And that's what he delivers in a way that you can independently verify it. And you can see that, yes, your mind is causing your own discontentedness. So when you're angry and frustrated and you're blaming other people, it's not other people that are causing these feelings in your mind. It's your own mind itself. And the more you come to terms with that and you can see the truth for yourself, then you can actually put the techniques and the solutions in place, and then you can fix it. But as long as you believe that other people are causing you to be angry, you'll never fix it because you're not actually addressing the real problem. So this is depicting that. And oftentimes when you see this particular depiction, the artist will have one of the people with gray hair depicting his former teacher. But whenever you see 5 people sitting around in the Buddhist teaching, that's depicting his very first teaching, the Four Noble Truths. Okay, and if you guys would like to study this in more depth, that's where you can come to the classes and the courses and retreats.